infrastructure, information exchange also from within particular sectors. So I would like now to invite Mr. Simon Uzunov from the energy community to present his presentation.
Thank you, Alexander. Good afternoon, everybody. I draw the short straw to animate you and wake you up after the lunch, perfect lunch that we had, and try not to put you to sleep, which is not easy. But I am grateful to the organizers to allow me this opportunity to address you on behalf of the Energy Community Secretariat, discussing this important activity, which is becoming more and more, let's say, activity also of the energy community, among other things as well. Because energy is one of the key areas where cybersecurity needs to enter. Shortly about energy community. It is organized around the international treaty, which aims to extending the EU internal energy market over the areas that are close to, that are within the EU but not EU member states. May I just stabilize? Okay, thank you very much. The mission of the energy community, it was established in 2006 and now working in several areas, of course, energy related. It is extending the EU electricity and gas market over the contracting parties of the energy community, creating a regulatory framework to increase the security of supply, to increase the investment in infrastructure, and to increase competition in the markets, of course, by protecting environment and the climate. What is specific for the energy community is the method. It is the use of the rule of law, which means that not only the treaty is legally binding, but also the operation is to enforce transposition and implementation of the energy acquis of the EU into the countries that are contracting parties in the energy community, which is, of course, relevant and related to the energy. This is the organizational structure of the energy community. The political decisions are done by the Ministerial Council, a permanent high-level group of representatives of the ministry, advised by the regulatory board, which implements the independent regulatory platform in the energy community. The Secretariat is the only permanent body, and about 50 people are now working there. The fora are platforms where the stakeholders are involved with advising the whole policy and the important issues and priorities for the next year. As I said, energy community works through the rule of law. There are several areas which are being enforced now from the EU legislation, of course, far from what exists, but this is the key relevant areas that we are working on enforcing implementation in the EU, and now we have to ambition to include the cybersecurity acquis. Of course, cybersecurity is more general. We cannot impose implementation in other areas than energy, and it is not only energy, so we are trying to go around this problem and find the best way to use the European Union relevant cybersecurity acquis implemented in the energy sector. What is so specific about energy? I have a couple of slides which I like very much because they illustrate a lot. In energy, there are two levels, let's say professional energy systems and public systems. In the professional system, the sources of cybersecurity stem from the networks themselves, from the infrastructure. The network topology in the energy is very complex. It's becoming more and more complex every day. This is one source of complexity and one increased risk for cybersecurity there. Another is the decentralization policy. There are so many distributed generation sources, more and more. We have consumers that are producers at the same time. And they include also introduce volatility in the system. This is another source of need for control and compensation and smart technologies, which is again source of risk for cybersecurity. There are diverse technologies being applied. There is no standard technology in the energy. It's something that still needs to be developed at least to the minimum necessary level. There are automated controls, which are not always accessible by people, and of course they are from that point sources of increased risk in cybersecurity. And of course there are different communication channels being used in the energy sector. It's not only energy communication professional channels, but there are first of all some digital channels in the energy infrastructure are shared with commercial data. And there are also some commercial channels used for energy-related services. So this is really another source of risk in the professional energy structure. In the public, we have even more higher level of risk. In particular, when we look at how the future houses or households are going to look. First of all, we have the volatile energy infrastructure out of the meter, I mean before the meter, which are solar PV panels or storage facilities or wind turbines that might be used more and more in individual purposes. And then we have beyond the meter or let's say beyond the control unit, we have the whole smart home, which includes smart appliances with all the digital and, let's say, critical services that communicate. The refrigerator in the future can order whatever is missing directly from the vendor for purchasing goods, and the electric car will become a smart car. And even today, with the telecommander for charging the car, one can, if there is a malware in this device, it can penetrate the professional network and go all the way to the transmission operator. It is physically and let's say electronically possible to do. So all this let's say structure is source of increased risks for cybersecurity. As I said, smart meters and appliances and data ownership is not standardized. The data ownership is not protected. There is no public awareness of these dangers, and the people cannot really know what they are purchasing, and there is no rules to prevent any kind of increased risk in this area. This is general view of it. This, of course, can result and has resulted, not particularly, but in general, in some cybersecurity incidents. Most of that is known. Cybersecurity incidents in the United States in energy are happening quite often. Of course, we don't know all of it because it ends up in their own systems. But for Europe, and especially for the energy community, there were two examples that I would like to underline. It is the attacks to the Ukrainian electricity grid in December 2015, that were 225,000 citizens supplied by 30 substations in the distribution system were out of the grid for some of them for 6 hours. Another, 1 year later, 1/5 of the city of Kiev was in darkness because for more than an hour, because on one of the main transmission substations SCADA system was attacked. The malware, it was cyber attack. The malware were in the second case, the second repeated event was much more developed, was recognized as swappable, automatic, multiple, universal and multiple multidirectional. It can attack several systems in parallel. It was very, very sophisticated. These attacks were correlated, and the Ukrainians were very lucky. The digitalization didn't come to the point where they abandoned the old technology of manual operation. So they were capable to separate parts of the network and limit the spreading of the attack. This reminds us that we are never safe and we must think about the things. Now I would go swiftly through the legal framework on cybersecurity related to energy in the EU. The most recent and most relevant act is the recommendation of the European Commission on cybersecurity. This recommendation relates mostly to what the Commission is recognized as specific, let's say, features of the energy sector that need to be addressed in a separate and specific manner. One of the features is the real-time requirements. Energy systems work in real time. It is not possible to take the system outside, to block it, to take it out somewhere and make forensic investigations for several days and find out what is where the attack comes from and what it all about. It works in milliseconds and need to be operational without any breakdown. So this is very specific, and this needs to be addressed in a special manner. We'll see later how. Second is the possibility of cascading effects. Cascading is not only in energy, it is similar in the telecommunication area. However, in energy, it happens on two levels. One is the information cascading effect, from when the malware can jump from one system to another. The second is cascading effect in the energy. If one system breaks down, it can pull down the neighboring systems as well. So we have to pay double level of attention on this second threat, that the system in the energy domain can really make a big damage and can spread to other areas as well. And the third source of risk in the energy specific is the combined legacy system and new technologies. Digitalization in energy goes in specific steps, and as I said, one can never really throw out the old system and bring in the next morning the digital control systems. It keeps using the old system in parallel for some time, and we have to protect two levels of technology. This is a picture of one control room of one utility. It is the same room. Left part is analog. The right part is digital. It is the same. The one unit was operated by analog control system, and the next unit was from the same room operated with digital. This company needs to protect both units and definitely need to have mixed technologies for this. I don't want to go through all the details that are in the recommendations. It is available and very, very relevant. I would simply want to mention a few key features. The real-time requirements in particular need to to build up the robustness of the network, the resilience, and to introduce redundancies in the system. Some systems need to be doubled to have reserve backup in order when they are eventually pulled down, not only, but including cybersecurity attack, they need to continue they can continue the operation through the backup system. This is one way, and of course there are many others. Let's say the architecture of the system needs to be safe and maintenance in a manner that can face the real-time requirements, which also goes for the cascading effects. Separation of certain parts of the system are needed in order to prevent spreading of the system from one country to another, or from one layer to another. We'll see later something more about it in practice, how it's done. And of course, technology mix need to have some kind of, let's say, some kind of digital backup to the protection of the analog systems or the old legacy systems that are still being used, because if the system is publicly not so much popular and very well known, it does not protect it. It is very well known in this domain that security by obscurity doesn't work. Obscure systems are not more safe than the others. So we need to simply make the systems, analyze them from all the points of attack, and then digitally protect them from this kind of attack. Of course, there are other measures as well. I don't want to read through it. This was the recommendation. It's very relevant for the energy. As I said, it is only a recommendation. Most of it will come further down the line, maybe even this year in the EU, through some references that are being introduced in the EU legislation through the new clean energy package for all Europeans in the energy sector, especially in the electricity domain, which will introduce 8 new acts, of which 4 are relevant for cybersecurity directly. The other are more, let's say, indirectly and not so much mentioned. We are still waiting for them to be published, but all of them are confirmed by the European Council last month, so we have the final version of these acts available. And quickly, just to mention what is relevant for cybersecurity in these 4 acts. The Electricity Directive, let's say, deals with cybersecurity in the context of smart metering, as I already mentioned. It is actually advanced metering architecture, which, for example, Norway is example for this. It's really a system that decides how the whole electricity infrastructure is going to be operated. It is not up to the humans to decide which and what kind of facility is going to be introduced anymore. It is the system itself, because it is somehow smarter. They use artificial intelligence, and it is even much more advanced and reacts much faster in this volatile structure of system to optimize the operation of the system much faster than the people can do, which is a source of risk in the cyber context. Of course, the metering data communication is also introduced through the smart metering, and it is recommended to apply the techniques that are best available in this context. Of course, this has to be defined yet. This is legislation, general legislation. Each country needs to decide which are the best techniques available. And a second aspect is that the directive imposes the TSOs to care for the data management and to introduce data management systems for protection against cyber attacks. This is rather general, but more specific is the electricity regulation. Electricity regulation, the new one, it imposes the tasks to ENTSO-E, the Association of Transmission System Operators, and the Distribution System Operators Association, to care about data protection and management in very specific ways. Also, in addition to this, there are rules for the newly introduced regional coordination centers, which are already there, but they are going to be mandatory. Participation in such a center are going to be mandatory once this comes into force. These are centers that coordinate the backup of the let's say, capacity mechanisms, and that provide services for security of supply in the countries, in the systems. And they need to have rules on protection of information and communication channels. All this leads to the need of development of a sort of new regulation specific for cybersecurity in the energy, which will be a network code for cybersecurity across the borders on the base of the previous experience. The other 2 acts are more general. The governance regulation puts the security, energy security, as such among the 5 pillars or 5 dimensions of the energy in the future, in the new clean energy environment, along with the decarbonization and energy efficiency, etc. But this is also very important because from this level also the energy security includes definitely the importance of cybersecurity in this respect of operation of the systems. And the risk preparedness regulation, of course, the word says that this risk assessment includes cybersecurity risk assessment in the context of security of supply in the first place, but also network operation, because it is also part of the security of supply. Identification of cyber risks and incidents in particular are being addressed, and risk assessment methodology is offered. The methodology, ENTSO-E is working on the platform on cyber risk mitigation and risk preparedness regulation based methodology. We can immediately go quickly through the parts of it, methodology, how it is being developed. Is going to work. First, the TSOs identify the risks on the crisis scenarios on national level. Then ENTSO-E integrates these findings on the crisis scenarios on regional level. Then it brings back to the TSOs these findings, and then they assess the regional scenarios from national perspective, how they can find themselves in these integrated scenarios. Then there is the impact assessment by ENTSO-E of these scenarios. And then these scenarios are being prepared, presented, implemented, and reviewed of the consequences by ENTSO-E. Of course, this includes handling of the information and feedback from the findings, and then they go again to planning the next scenario. This is the cycle that ENTSO-E is prepared. Talking about ENTSO-E, they already have a platform, a part of the legal framework. They have a platform for cyber risk mitigation. They find two levels of challenge. The regulatory challenge, the level that is the regulation level, meaning that in the EU, not only energy community, but even in the EU, the country level regulations not always allow total sharing of information between the countries, or on a broader level. Additional problems is on the borders between EU and non-EU countries, which are no problem for a cyber attack, but are problem for regulation. Because if we cannot have some transfer of regulatory rules or adjustment of regulatory rules of one country based on the rules across the border, we are in problem. The organization challenge is the structure of ENTSO-E. They defined, I like very much this metaphor, is the Russian dolls system. They have system within a system within a system. That is ENTSO-E. From the huge ENTSO-E network of 5 parts, then they have regional, they have national, they have some communal systems, and they come to cities, to distribution systems, and down and down. It is one into another into another. Each of them need to be assessed and protected against cybersecurity. But this is a challenge, because we are dealing with a very, very complex system in the structural manner. Second is the diversity of the facilities that are connected, starting from the largest generation plant facility all the way to the cooker or on some restaurant or somewhere, I mean, really, really minute consumer. All of them need to find their position in the cybersecurity mechanism. And the third, they recognize the challenge of discussing and implementing policy among companies which are so huge that nobody can tell them to do anything. The ENTSO-E has problems to implement their policies with the stakeholders that are really mighty, and they have their own policies, their own knowledge, their own systems, their own people, facilities. So driving them to go on the same path, in the same direction, hand by hand, it is really, really difficult for them. What are the policies? Roughly speaking, there are 2 policies which were already mentioned. One is the security, prevention, and practices, training, and teams that are going to secure and fight cyber attacks and prevent any damage. And the third is the resilience. Working ahead of the time, as I mentioned, it is one of the ways to let's say, to protect the critical infrastructure in energy. That is monitoring of incidents and being aware, sharing information on this, detection of incidents in advance, then response timely, and backup, having backup system, and recovery principles for that matter. Not finally, but next is the ENISA. As you mentioned, ENISA has 3 levels of operation in energy. One is the Smart Grid Task Force group, which is working on a network code. I'm not going to go in all the details here, but just to know that first is the definition of the network codes, what are the targets of the network codes. The second, and what is being done now, is the key areas where this network code will be applied. It is, first of all, it is harmonized baseline, which is conformity with the standards, especially the ISO 27000 standards. By the way, these standards is very complex, and we discussed once in the first meeting of the cyber group in our energy community. And the advice was to be careful because it's very expensive. It does not really deserve to apply the whole standard to every piece of infrastructure. It needs to be adjusted, and nobody can take the responsibility how the risk will be assessed. So there is a topic on its own. That's why ENISA is working with them. And then there is, of course, the minimum security requirements that everybody needs to follow. Then implementation of operators of essential services in cybersecurity, and supportive elements like supply chain security and correspondence and maturity of frameworks that are being applied in the cybersecurity organizations, etc., etc. The 2 other areas are the NIST Directive Cooperation Group of ENISA, which actually provides advice to all the necessity of implementation of NIST directive in the EU member states. This includes direct hands-on operation and support. This includes certification of methodologies for adoption of methodologies for certification of cybersecurity infrastructure and products, because this is very important. Certification is something that will allow to lowering the risk in the cybersecurity domain in the energy. Not all companies are now struggling to get this certification, and ENISA does not certify. There are laboratories that are doing it, but ENISA is defining the rules for each company of each product, how they are going to be certified that their products are cyber resilient. And this is something that needs to be included in the tendering procedures for new infrastructure and energy everywhere. But it's not ENISA, it's the regulator's task. And the third is the ISAC set of teams. ISAC is the teams for discussion and exchange of information among the stakeholders. Stakeholders directly in energy stakeholders, meaning utilities, operators, authorities, regulators, everybody. And they have periodical meetings. I think in September will be one ISAC meeting, and this is something that needs to be observed. It was even advice from ENISA. We visited, energy community visited ENISA last week in Athens, during the Athens Forum. They were presented in the Athens Forum some of their findings and activities, so we are establishing communication with ENISA as energy community, of course. And we are trying to share the experience and involved and somehow link, but I'll talk later about it. ISACs are discussing the communication on the analog information, digital information, and of course diversity of types of information, like best practices, like research topics, like some technology issues, and all that is mentioned there. And finally, ACER, or the regulatory domain. How the regulators energy regulators are dealing with cybersecurity. There are 2 areas. One is the huge REMIT area. REMIT is the regulation of energy market integrity and transparency, especially transparency, because transparency is the source of needs for cybersecurity. The regulation requires protection against abuse of data, abuse of information, insider information of the systems, etc. I'm not going to go in many details about what is REMIT, but the REMIT regulation deals with the access to data by everybody that are authorized to use this data, which means that anybody who is not authorized should not access this data, especially with some let's say, ideas to abuse it or to modify it, like in the cyber attack. The agency tasks are to provide operational security, and agency is the ACER, the European Regulatory Agency, to provide operational security and prevent unauthorized access, as I mentioned, and then to provide the rules how other authorities, regulators are going to access the data. Also, REMIT addresses the regulatory authorities themselves, how they are going to provide confidentiality and integrity of data and protection in their own domain of activities. These are more or less the REMIT-related aspects of the regulatory activities. The second is the cost recovery principles. Regulators are those who approve the costs for investment and approve the rules for tendering of new infrastructure. In both cases, the cost recovery must include the recovery of costs for cybersecurity criteria that are being applied. They have to recognize what is important and what is not, and how much the impact on the price of the systems if we want to have cyber-safe system. And then also include in the tendering procedures criteria to have minimum criteria of cybersecurity. This was general introduction. Now I'll quickly go through energy community activities in this. This all started in July 2018 by the recommendation of the permanent high-level group, as I mentioned before, on establishing a task force on cybersecurity and introducing some provisional activities. I'm not going to go through all of this for the sake of being more efficient in time. The cybersecurity initiative then turned into a procedural act. Procedural act of the energy community is not a law, but it is adopted by all the ministers and the ministerial council and has the power to impose the obligation of the ministers to implement this act. Because we couldn't enforce the obligations to transpose all the cybersecurity legal framework of the EU, which includes non-energy areas, we compiled the energy-related provisions from this acquis into this procedural act. So it covers several legal acts of the EU having relevance in the energy domain. And then it means domain is the electricity, natural gas, oil transport, and pollution and combustion emission to the level that is relevant for cybersecurity. And of course, the digital and electronic communication. These are domains where this procedural act works. The stakeholders that are being responsible to implement this act is the ministries and regulators as authorities, the operators of critical infrastructure and provider of essential services, and national CERTs. The procedural act covers this key here, meaning the Electronic Communication Network Services Directive. You probably know all of it. The Critical Infrastructure Directive, the NIS Directive, and the European standardization for some of the regulation for some of the definitions there. Here it is not include the standard 27,000 set of standards, but it is not something that the Act covers. It is something that need to be introduced through the regulatory rule because we cannot impose obligation to use standards. These are the tasks of the Cybersecurity Coordination Group to provide the environment for cooperation and exchange of information, to establish EU coherent methodologies for risk assessment in the contracting parties, which includes Macedonia, North Macedonia, and other Western Balkan countries, to establish EU-compliant standards to being used, to establish a communication of the CERTs or CERT network, and support capacity building in this domain, and to cooperate and eventually introduce some partnership with ENISA for all the countries to benefit from at least in the energy sector that we might expect. The other level of activity is the cybersecurity study. It was started in December. Now it is already being advanced. We are some on the control point 2, already passed. So we are now expecting to have the second workshop somewhere probably end of June or beginning of July. Let's see how this will develop. The result we expect to have them by end of September or October, and this is work in progress. We need to have some basis for assessment of what is the best way to proceed. The objectives of the study is, I don't go through all the points, there are threefold. One is to assess the state of affairs. Second is to identify the gaps. Third is to propose measures for upgrade and coordination platform, mainly speaking. And this goes also through the tasks. Tasks is the stock taking, which is being finalized now. There are teams in most of the countries, I believe in North Macedonia as well, but also in other countries. There are stock taking on all these aspects that are mentioned, on projects, on standards, on activities that are being done in cybersecurity related to energy sector, the education facilities and training if something exists, the cooperation projects, the standards that are being applied, simply to know all these things that I mentioned before, where we stand in each of the contracting parties. Task 2 is to analyze this information and actually to find the gaps in this and really to also to assess the cybersecurity risks, how exposed we are, because we'll see methodology later. The task 3 is to provide the remedies, simply to provide the amendments possible amendments to the acts, measures to improve cybersecurity mechanisms, to propose some educations, and to provide a roadmap of how to proceed further. The methodology, also, I don't want to go to all the details, you can follow it later. If you want, the idea is that the risk is assessed through the threats and vulnerabilities. What are the threats and how exposed the countries are to these threats, and how, on the other side, the infrastructure is vulnerable to these threats, how much damage these threats can impose on this infrastructure. So these two factors, along with the probability of these threats and impacts, these provide the assessment of the risk. This goes for all the country one by one. Cybersecurity Coordination Group. The meeting was on 11th of April, first meeting. It was attended with some representatives, but not all of them. I'm still expecting to have a little bit more advanced participation from energy sector, but I'm really a little bit disappointed because I cannot see here very many energy representatives in this meeting as well, but okay, let's see. What we are planning to do by the end of 2019 is, first of all, to support the definition of critical infrastructure. Coordination Working Group on Critical Infrastructure would work on the problems and obstacles in definition, identification, and nomination of critical infrastructure, because it is very important. The infrastructure needs to be nominated across the border, not only in the country, because it might be critical in the neighboring country, although it is located here. So this needs to be nominated and recognized by both, at least, neighboring countries. Then on the governance, meaning that the authorities, ministries, and regulators need to be educated in the cybersecurity. Energy ministries mostly don't have a clue what is cybersecurity. We need to somehow help them somehow transpose this directive in the energy legislation, if it is not already in a separate law, but will definitely need to be adjusted to the energy to the level that it is critical there. In the EU, 80% of the critical infrastructure is in energy. I didn't mention before, regulators distinguish, and energy is specific in this, the information, just a moment, one digression, want to underline this. Yeah, information technology and operational technology. Information technology is everywhere. Operational technology is in the energy. Very specific, and they are not the same. Mechanisms that protect the information technology might not be relevant and the same is the operational technology, which is very important for the energy. And this is something that we need to recognize, and the energy ministries need to know how they are going to deal with this, which is eventually not the case yet. Then discussion panel for the CIRS. We are somehow having in mind possibility to establish energy CIRT for the energy community. Austria is the only EU country that has specific energy CIRT. But let us see how this will progress. For the time being, we are planning to establish a channel for communication, a panel or a platform for regular communication between the CERTs related to energy issues in particular. We are going to develop work plans for these issues by the end of September, having in mind the results of the study. And of course, program for capacity building. Everybody wants to be educated and trained. EU has about 10,000 experts in cybersecurity, and they say they need 20,000 more. This region needs 95% of what is still missing in this region. It's my free assessment. Of course, cooperation with all these agencies, including ENISA, is something that we need also to foster and promote. The Athens Forum promoted cybersecurity the first time, and these are the conclusions. The cybersecurity is shared. Each country needs to get into this domain. Protection of the identification, protection of critical infrastructure and essential services, and implementation of the legislation is imminent. And the regulators need to step forward with cost recognition practices related to cybersecurity. I will stop here. I was a little bit fast maybe, but I will still be available for some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Uzunov. Please join us at the tables there for the second part of the session, which has the same concept as the first one. So we continue with the presentations, and after that we'll have a segment dedicated to questions from the audience and from the participants. So our next presenter is from the first Macedonian academic CERT, Mr. Anastas Mishev from Finkice.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anastas Mishev. My home institution is actually the Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering, but I'm here bearing multiple hats, at least two. One will be the head of GEANT and the security advancements that are done within the academic networks and within their association known as GEANT. And the other at the end will be the one that's already on the slide, the Finkice, the few words about the first academic CERT in the country. Because it's a specific target audience, maybe majority of you haven't heard anything about GEANT, so I would like to say a few words on what GEANT is, what is its mission, when someone says GEANT, it means multiple things actually. It means an association, membership association of European NRENs, National Research and Academic Networks. We also have one here, it's called MARNET. But it also means projects. GEANT Association coordinates projects. The flagship projects being the GN project that I will speak a little bit later within the presentation. It also operates a pan-European e-infrastructure based on its GEANT network, on top of it offering e-infrastructure services supporting the research and education community Europe-wide. It manages a big portfolio of services for research and education. Some of them you might heard of, for example, the EduRoam service, the service that enables researchers not only from Europe, but from more than 100 regions all over the world to connect seamlessly to the wireless networks wherever they travel and go using their home institution credentials. It also offers different edu prefixed services. It organizes and runs community events. The big GEANT conference is coming up later this June in Tallinn, the TNC conference. The main goal is to to support the collaboration and the development among the researchers, dissemination of information and knowledge, and of course access to this big portfolio of services that is managed by GEANT and or by its constituents or its members, the academic and research networks. 40 academic and research networks across Europe are member of this association. You will see the logos here, and the important thing is that they serve a huge community, a community of around, can you remove the task? Yeah, thank you. The community of around 10,000 institutions and more than 15 million researchers. GEANT also partners with academic networks from the States, from the Middle East, Far East, Australia, South America, etc. Here is the map of the Europe and most of the countries in Europe having the research and education network being partner already in GEANT. One of the key points of GEANT, one of the key activities in GEANT is the coordination of these big infrastructure projects. This project started maybe 15 years ago. Currently, we are at the third stage of the fourth GEANT project. You see here on the slide the last 3 stages of the fourth GEANT projects. The one that started in 2015, the 4.1, the 4.2 that ended in December 2018, and the current one, the ongoing one, the so-called GEANT 4.3 project that started this year and will run for 4 years until the end of 2022. It's a project funded by the European Union, supporting the work of GEANT and its constituents. Talking about the project itself, 39 partners from 42 different countries, almost 160 full-time equivalents of workload, provided financing by the European Union, more than 500 different contributors registered, varying from scientific, operational, community, etc., with EU funding of around 130 million euros. The work in the project divided into 9 activities. They by themselves divided into 34 tasks with a lot of deliverables and milestones. Here is the organizational structure of the project, and it resembles historically the previous projects that were the previous phases of the GEANT projects, except for one very interesting moment, one very specific element that is rather new to these projects, and it is the WP8, the Work Package 8, called the security. All the others are somehow continuation of work that was previously done. There are some DevOps, the so-called DevOps packages. Previously, they were called joint research activities that tackle various aspects of the networking, services development, delivery, trust and identity, network technologies and services, core infrastructure. Then there are operational support tasks that take care of operating the pan-European infrastructure, and of course the management work packages. The new addition to this third phase of the fourth version of the fourth GEANT project is the security work package. Security was not that the security was omitted in the previous versions of the project, not at all. Of course, security was part of many different tasks. Trust and identity worked a lot of security, a lot of tools were developed in various of the previous projects that tackled the security, like firewall on demand, like VPN, edu VPN, like DDoS mitigation, etc. But now GEANT realized, and the Endurance realized, that it's very important to somehow converge all these elements, to converge them into a separate task, into a separate work package in the projects that will deal exclusively with security. Keeping research and education networks safe and secure at the backbone level, but also supporting partners, GÉANT partners, which means the National Research and Education Networks, with up-to-date tools, which is very important, providing them with tools and know-how to keep their networks and the connection to the GÉANT network infrastructure safe and secure in times of, or in an environment of increased level of cybersecurity threats. We witnessed this through the talks of all the previous presentations. So I'll be talking mostly about the advances that are done in the academic sector, but many speakers before me mentioned that cybersecurity does not know national borders. It does not recognize borders between different communities. So energy community, education community, or other community, when something happens, it can affect all of us, as well as all countries. That's the same goes for the communities and cross-community importance. The new work package has around 40 plus participants from 19 organizations in 14 different countries, with 4.3 million euro budget for the upcoming 4 years, and it has 3 major tasks. The first one is called the business continuity, which is the task mostly related to the resilience of the academic and research networks. The second one is about the risk management, the security baselining, and it's called the security baselining. And the third task is actually a set of small subtasks which are technology and or product related. We have Security Operations Center, Vulnerability Assessment as a Service, DDoS mitigation, Firewall on Demand, and EduVPN as products or services offered to the GÉANT community. The first task deals with the business continuity, crisis management, but also security training and awareness. We have several subtasks in this task dealing with all of these 4 topics mentioned before. Creating a cybersecurity resilient entrance that will have a high cyber security awareness culture, as mentioned by one of the previous presentations, not only raising the awareness, but working on the culture of the users within the organizations and within the whole GÉANT community. Since we are in the first year of the project, we are currently analyzing what is the status of the entrance and of their related certs. Many of the entrants already have either as internals or separate entities have their own academic certs in various models, some of them very small, some of them very big, some of them being even private-public partnership. All the models are within GÉANT community, and we would like to get the best practices. We would like to get the best of them, collect everything that they do and try to see what can we systematize and offer to all the other smaller entrants or the entrants that does not have not reached that level of cyber resilience. We organize also the so-called CLAW, crisis management events. I think at least once a year CLAW events are organized for the constituents where they have a possibility for hands-on crisis management events and trainings. Support for security trainings and support for awareness campaign materials. We hope that we will have enough material in the first year so we can start publishing some different forms of information to the constituents to work on the raising the level. It's a very specific target audience. It's a big target audience. I mentioned 50 million engaged researchers all across Europe. So it's a very, very diverse and big audience that needs to be reached to and needs to get their awareness raised about the cybersecurity problems. Keep in mind that the research today is done almost all research is done based on the infrastructures. e-infrastructure are becoming the key part of every research, no matter if it's high energy physics, whether it's earth science, or there are social sciences as well. Everything is done based on these huge, big e-infrastructures that need to be cyber protected. Security baselining is the second task. We here would like to produce some kind of security framework and some set up some tests as a benchmarking system that will enable us to see and to evaluate the level of readiness and the level of awareness of cybersecurity of the constituting entrants. We are working on some of the topics in this task. Task 3, I already mentioned, is focused on several different tools and several different services offered to GÉANT partners. Some of these are new, majority of these were previously developed or were starting, their development started previously, and now they are reaching the production phase where they can be offered to the partners, to the academic networks. Well, first is the Security Operation Center. The idea here is to gather a comprehensive set of security operation tools along with everything needed to these tools to train the users, to document everything so they can, along with the best practices, so the people that are working in the security operation centers can use these tools to protect their own networks. Currently, we are trying to describe the high-level architecture and release the first version by the end of the first year of the limited toolset. By the end of the project, we expect to complete this toolset of Security Operations Center tool. Another interesting service that we would like to develop within this working package is the task 3.2 duty. It's called the Vulnerability Assessment as a Service. Investigate feasible, scalable solution. Keep in mind that we are academic networks. We are always struggling with the budgets. We are always turning toward open source solutions. So our goal here is to find the feasible but also scalable solutions that will enable the identification of security vulnerabilities, tools that will suit this purpose, and give them to the entrants to assess themselves, give them to the entrants to make their security assessment without any extra effort putting into it. We are currently working on the legal requirements from the participating countries. We are collecting best practices, sharing best practices, and comparing requirements, mostly focusing on open source tools, but maybe some commercials where open source tools are either not available or not fit to the purpose. The third task, subtask of the third task, is the defense against distributed denial of service. It's as the distributed denial of service is distributed by nature, its defense is always ideal to be distributed also by nature. We would like to build, we would like to maintain also a modular flow analysis suite that will enable mitigating DDoS solutions, detecting DDoS, mitigating DDoS attacks, detecting DDoS attacks, and give access to this to the entrants that are part of GÉANT and to the institutions that are behind these entrants. Several workshops are being planned for this year. There is a tool that the DFN, the German Research and Education Networks, network which, by the way, has one of the strongest certs associated with it. They already have a tool, and we are working on somehow opening this tool to the broader audience of entrants and their associated certs. Firewall on demand, generalized multi-domain firewall on demand interface that will enable the entrants, the constituents of GÉANT to integrate these tools within their infrastructure and to collect monitoring data and to enable them better protection on demand. There is some development already done in the previous versions. We expect that by the end of the year we will have the latest version of the firewall on demand released and available to the entrants. And I think the final one is the Edu VPN. Edu VPN is an idea that the researchers traveling across on exchanges, on conferences, etc., sometimes do have the need to have a higher level of security when accessing their data or accessing their infrastructure. The idea of Edu VPN is to continue the previous development of the VPN client applications and enable integration. One of the key services of Géant, aside from EduRoam, which is the flagship one, is the EduGain, the distributed authentication and authorization infrastructure. Based on this infrastructure, we would like to integrate this infrastructure into a simple desktop or mobile clients that the researchers will be able to establish a VPN from their end devices using the same credentials wherever they are wherever they are hosted in some institutions. There are already available solutions on the markets, on the Google Play and on the Apple Play Store that enable academic users to use their academic credentials and connect either to their home institutions or to endpoints provided by Géant to enable them VPN establishment from their own devices. So to sum up, we are gathering requirements mostly in the first year, gathering contacts, building up on examples, what's already there, defining the scope of the network, focusing on the collaboration, exchanging best practices between entrants, especially between certs associated with the entrants, and of course making important decisions on how to proceed further. So I will just mention that Géant is playing an important organizational role even outside of the academic community. Géant is organizationally and logistically supporting lots of special interest groups and task forces. For example, one of them is the TF CERT within the security. Information Security Management Special Interest Group is also organizationally supported by Géant. So Géant invests a lot into supporting these communities. For example, TF CERT, the 57th meeting was just 2 weeks ago in Luxembourg of the TF CERT task force CERTs. It is supported organizationally and logistically by Géant to improve the collaboration between the European CERT community. Members of the TF CERT are not only academic CERT, actually the academic CERTs are a minority there. Most of it are national or professional production level CERTs. Transit trainings are also coordinated by Géant, well known to your community. The Trusted Introducer service is also supported logistically or organizationally by Géant. So Géant invests a lot of its people and its time and its resources toward the security. And at the end, I will switch my head back to my home institution CERTs. Being a faculty of around 4,000 active undergraduate students in Skopje, being a faculty that is basing all of its activity on digital infrastructure, starting from enrollment of the students, learning management, course management, up to testing and exams. For everything we rely on our infrastructure, and with a specific at some point even making some exercises, real life scenarios exercises with the students with phishing attacks. We understood that we need to establish a separate internal organization unit that will tackle these problems. So at 2017, as a separate internal organizational unit of the Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering, the FINCI CERT was established. Incident handling proactive security and quality management are the three main groups of activities and working groups that are done within the CERT. For the services, of course, the primary service was incident reporting and incident handling, but we also, being an educational institution, we also focus a lot on information dissemination, advices to the student, education of the students. I think CERT is a voluntary organization, actually. In its work, colleagues that participate in the work of the CERT are either from the academic staff, which means professors and teaching assistants that work and research on topics related to cybersecurity. Technical staff, we have a quite advanced and big computing center that hosts services not only for the faculty but also for the university and even some of the national services of several ministries of the country. But I believe our strongest points are our students. When we published the CERT, we also published a call for interest for students, and we have a big group of 20 to 30 students that are very interested in contributing to this goal, to this CERT. We try to animate them, try to organize for them invited lectures, try to organize them visits from security professionals, disseminate regular informations, give them access to advanced course material from the courses we teach. And I must say that we have an excellent collaboration with the national CERT, with the MKD CERT, in all the things they do, and of course we do as one of their constituents. So thank you. If you have any questions, I think we'll delay it for the debate after. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for presenting activities regarding the GEANT project, and also introducing to the public, to the audience, the activities of the first Macedonian academic CERT in the country. So we've come to the last presentation for today. Trials and tribulations of cybersecurity information sharing. I would like to invite Christian Popov from Telelink Business Services to present.
Thank you again. So, as he said, my name is Christian Popov. I'm a senior security analyst for, yeah, it doesn't work. Right. So yeah, my name is Christian Popov. I am a senior security analyst for Telelink Business Services, which is basically part of the Telelink group. So this is basically the agenda today. We're going to talk about living in the information age, the cybersecurity information sharing, responsible disclosure. We're going to look at some real-life case studies, and then we're going to go to the conclusions and about information sharing. So a little bit about Telelink Group at a glance. We've been here for about 18 years. We have contacts with major vendors. We actually have an office here in Macedonia, so that's why I'm here. So yeah, presenting information sharing. Right, so Telelink Group consists of business services, which deals basically with IT infrastructure, with the security operations center, digital transformation, so on. We have info services, which basically deal with physical security. We have smart city services, which deal with smart cities. And we have labs, which deal with 5G. Basically, we have a lot of services. Basically, we deal with a lot of security incidents as well. So, right, these are some expertise in services. All right, these are some industry partners. These are some of my clients. Now, on to information sharing. As you can see, back in ancient times, Aristotle said that man is actually a social creature. We love to share information. We love to talk to each other. We love making our little society so we can make little groups and talk to each other and do everything as a group. Now, in the 21st century, now we have big data, AI, machine learning. We have all kinds of information, and we really love sharing it. We have social media where we share everything we have. We even overshare some things, and so on. Basically, information sharing is everywhere. Now, let's talk about cybersecurity information sharing and how that happens. All right, so we have analyst to analyst, we have public disclosure, we have analyst to enterprise, enterprise to enterprise, and we have responsible disclosure. Right, so these are some of the types of information sharing. Let's look at some of them in more detail. The first one is basically the most common one, which is analyst to analyst. Basically, people from different kinds of SOCs use the internet to communicate with each other every day, share different kinds of information. Sorry, I'm gonna need some water. So, yeah, some of the topics that they share are indicators of compromise, new attack tactics, attack defenses, actually, emerging threats, security news, and all kinds of other stuff. So here are some examples. As you can see, we have, so that's right to the left for you. We have a security journalist disclosing an article about some malware. We have people that work for red teams, penetration teams. We have people that share use cases, CM use cases, and all kinds of other stuff. Now, public disclosure. Public disclosure basically is when you try to disclose a vulnerability to the public. As the name states, the idea here is to just make it public. You don't really take any sides, you just disclose the vulnerability and that's it. So there are two ways of actually doing it. There's an easy way where you can write the article, you can state what you need to state, you can talk about it all you want, you can post it on a blog or post it on a website, and you can tell the information. The second way is the hard way, in which you involve a journalist or a reputable company or reputable site, work together, disclose the vulnerability, create an article, and then send it out on the internet. Now that's the hard way because you see, when you get other people involved, you lose control of the information, you lose control of everything you've done. So once it's out there, once it's public, you lose control over it. If anybody has anything gone viral, he'll tell you that it can be very stressful. Your cell phone starts blowing up, you get connected. Some people try to connect with you over social media, over all kinds of other sites. So yeah, there can be a lot of problems with public disclosure. We're actually gonna come back to public disclosure in a bit, see what happens in more detail. Right, so here are some examples of public disclosure. As you can see, you don't really take sides, you just say, here's the vulnerability, here's the information, here's how it works. Well, in more details in the links. So that's pretty much public disclosure. Then we have analyst to enterprise. Different analysts from different companies find different vulnerabilities, different things, different kind of information every day, and they have a choice to make, really. So the first choice is basically to disclose the information, share the information, disclose the vulnerability to the affected party, or you can keep it a secret, and you can potentially use that said vulnerability to use against the company or against the product. The third way is to do nothing. You know it's there, but you don't really take any action. Now, most security researchers will basically do the right thing and contact the company or the vendor or the product and tell them there's a vulnerability. However, we all know that the internet is not full of rainbows and sunshine, and there are some bad people over the internet. So yeah, that's not always the case. They don't always disclose the vulnerability. Now, here are some examples. I really like that Forbes one. We were involved in an exploitation domain for the Forbes website. Now, is anybody noticing any trends with the screenshots? As you can see, most of them are from Twitter. Is anybody here on Twitter? Okay, so are your companies on Twitter? Just side questions, don't really need to answer them. Why I'm asking? So Twitter is basically one of the best ways to get information and cybersecurity information for that matter. So if your company is on Twitter, people can reach out to you a lot easier and basically share what information they found. That's what we're seeing here. Different kinds of analysts contact the company that's affected and tell them different things. For example, your users got phished or your website has malware on it. Now, what do you think happens when somebody on the internet tells your company, hey, you have malware on your website? There are three possible reactions, really. The first one, and the best one, they say thank you, they give you a small reward, and you move on. The second one is whatever. They don't really give you an answer, no feedback. whatever. And the third part, the third one, and sadly the most common one, is they get angry at you and they start asking questions and asking where you get that information and how did you get it, who are you? We're sending the lawyers. That's basically the worst part. Right, here are some examples of that. Sadly, yeah, security researchers try to do their best, they try to share the information, try to help people protect themselves, try to help companies protect themselves, and they get sued, which it's not really the best thing. Now, as you can see, that's a pretty bad thing. How do you think we can fix that? Yeah, as you can see, basically the whole process is broken. So, but yeah, good thing is that there is actually a solution, and it's called the responsible disclosure policy. This policy, as you can see, I don't know if you can see it actually. I'll read it out loud. So it states, here at the Acme Corporation, we value our security and we know that there are new vulnerabilities every day. So if you find the vulnerability, contact us, tell us about it and follow our process. And then we will respond in 3 business days, we'll check it, we'll confirm it if it's true or not, and we'll give you feedback. If it's true, we might give you a little reward. Right, so as you can see, some of the bigger companies or other companies have these responsible disclosure policies. That way they can disclose information to one another without really getting sued. You can use your company's name to disclose information to other companies so that they don't really sue you individually or do anything bad to you. So as you can see, we have Google here and Palo Alto, which basically disclosed Microsoft vulnerabilities to Microsoft. And I don't know if you can see it. So they found it on the 27th of February. However, they disclosed it on the 7th of March. So basically, they gave them a week or two so that they can find the vulnerability, try it out, test it, and once that happens, they can confirm or deny it's true, it can be exploited or not. Right, so responsible disclosure. That's when you find the vulnerability and not get sued, I guess. So there are 2 ways you can do that. You can find the vulnerability, disclose it privately, emphasis on privately. You can talk to the company and you can give them the report and see what happens. And from then on, it's for the company to decide what happens. Now, there are certain situations where disclosing the information privately doesn't really work. You don't get feedback or you don't get valuable feedback. That's when you go public, because you can put pressure on the company to fix their vulnerability. Or if you put it publicly, then people will start using that, stop using that product or stop using that website. Right. These are some of the reasons you can actually go public with a vulnerability or disclose said information. If you're not getting proper feedback, if they're not patching the vulnerability, if you think that going public would be better for you and for other people, if you fear that you might get sued. Right, here we have some examples. So yeah, as you can see, a security researcher found something and he's trying to contact the company, but he's not getting any feedback. Here, the company doesn't even have any presence, or he can't get in contact with said company, so he's looking for people working for said company to talk to them and help them. And we have another one. Now, let's look at some real-life case scenarios. I think you're gonna like this one. So, can we play it? Yeah. So we worked on a research project trying to find vulnerable SCADA systems that had RDP protocol exposed to the internet. We used Shodan, which is a IoT search engine, in hopes to find said SCADA systems. Now, look at the number of how many SCADA systems there are in Bulgaria that have RDP exposed. There are over 900. And yeah, let me just tell you, having RDP exposed to the internet for your SCADA system is very bad. It's a really bad practice. So yeah, that's basically what you call an attack vector, that they can use RDP to get into your SCADA systems, and from then on, they can infect your entire network. Right, so it's a bit of a longer video, so I'm gonna just skip it. So right, yeah, we were trying to look at SCADA systems and RDP vulnerabilities. As you can see, the number of vulnerabilities grows every day, every year. we get more and more. Actually, there's one new one that's called Bluekeep, and they're actually saying that it might cause the next WannaCry, but we'll see. All right, so what did we do? We found the SCADA system, and now we have to talk to them. However, the problem is we couldn't find any contacts for them. So we tried the next best thing. We contacted their ISP, their internet service provider. And for those, yeah, it just says, hello, my name is Alexander Tsorkev in this case. He's our SOC manager. And we, as you can see, we're using our official email. We are using official channels. We're just trying to get a contact from the ISP to the client. However, we didn't really get anything. And that's kind of a problem. So yeah, we tried contacting one ISP, we tried contacting the second ISP, and we didn't get any problem, any answers. And this is where it stops. This is where we tried to give them the information. We tried to tell them they have the vulnerability. However, we couldn't get in contact with them, and somebody could exploit said vulnerability. Right, so we had limited contact information, and we had no feedback. Next thing, is anybody here familiar with the collections data breach? Okay, so for those that don't know, the collections data breach, basically, it's not one breach, it was more like 100 data breaches that were collected in 5 collections. All of them basically were 1 terabyte or more. So that's 1 terabyte of user data, 1 terabyte of emails and passwords. There were more than 6 million accounts, and there were actually 19 Bulgarian domains which we tried to identify. So yeah, this is the record, how many records each of the Bulgarian sites had in those data breaches. As you can see, it ranges from 100 to 400,000. Now, we kind of analyzed the information, and are you noticing something strange about the passwords that they used? So a lot of people use their phone numbers as passwords. They use their social security numbers as passwords, which is, again, a bad practice. And they used small passwords, short passwords, simple passwords, so that there is just a password. It doesn't really follow any security controls at all. Right, so what did we do? So we found the data breaches, we downloaded them from a Tor site, right? So, and we tried to find familiar websites, so familiar websites that we use, that our friends used. Once we identified those sites, we started looking for people that we knew. Once we identified people that we knew, we started calling them. I personally had to call a few of my friends and tell them, hey, your email and passwords are in this data breach, please change your password. The next thing we did is research and analysis on the leaked passwords so that we can find some useful data. Right, so some problems that we encountered. The huge amount of data, the 1 terabyte of data that we analyzed, we had to do some serious automation to get it through. Then, again, contacting companies was, again, one of the bigger problems. Most companies either didn't have contacts, or the ones that we did, and we contacted, basically had bipolar reactions. Some of them were, yeah, okay, no problem. Others were, whatever. Good thing, sorry. So a good thing is that some of the companies actually were okay with us saying that they had a data breach and they wanted to know how the data breach occurred. So some of these cases turned into forensic cases, and we had to go on site, check the servers and see how they breached. Right, so what did we learn? It's not an easy task contacting people. Even though you found the information, you want to let them know that they've been compromised or they've been hacked, and you can't really do it, and that's really discouraging sometimes. But yeah, we just have to do it. Yeah, this is why we're here. This is why we work in the Security Operations Center. Yeah, basically we provide a holistic approach to cybersecurity. We do pretty much everything from legal to SOC to cybersecurity projects and so on. So yeah, this is basically our setup. However, as you can see, we have a R&D department. In the R&D department, you can see that we have a collaboration part. So this is where all of this gets through. We try to work with other SOCs, other people, other companies, anybody who wants help, anybody who, yeah, anybody else. As you can see, we're actually participating in a few major projects, in the Eco-European project, in the Paris Tech Accords for Information Sharing, the NATO Cybersecurity Coalition, and other ones. So yeah, all this information basically falls into threat intelligence. That's what we do. Once we find something, or once somebody notifies us, we try to look at the intelligence, review it, analyze it, and say, yeah, okay, no problem, or forward it to somebody else, to some affected company or something, and move on. So yeah, this is this is a slide on the ECHO project. Basically, it's a network of cybersecurity centers or a network of SOCs, so that we can exchange people, so we can train people, people can come in, see what's going on, other people, we can go places, we can go help companies and so on. So yeah, personally, I think it's our goal to basically share as much information as possible. Here are some examples. Our SOC manager is actually a bit of an educator. He uses his personal blog as an educational site. I'm more operational. I share malware and other stuff. And then we have Ilya, who is our biggest weapon, I guess. He's one of our forensic analysts. He does really important stuff. So I don't really understand him sometimes. However, yeah, he actually helped out Microsoft to fix a bypass for their Defender AV. So yeah, we try to help as much as possible. So, conclusions. Security information sharing is still maturing, as you can see. There's still a lot of problems. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of risks involved for security researchers, so they tend not to share a lot of information with companies. They tend to share information between themselves because it's safe. The other thing is, as you can see, the reactions weren't as good. Some companies are not prepared for it. Companies should really work on their responsible disclosure policies so that they don't have this knee-jerk reaction to everything. And there's actually a lot to gain from information sharing. And like they taught us in middle school, sharing is caring. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Popov, for this excellent presentation. It was very insightful and interesting to see the issues that you're facing regarding information sharing. Some of the present CERT participants can also attest to these problems or issues in everyday activities. Now is the second part of the session, so I would ask the audience if they have any question for our speakers.
Hello to everyone. My name is Marko Gyako. I'm coming from Macedonian Air Navigation Service Provider. So I have a question for Mr. Mishev from the. My question is related to the tools you mentioned you are developing in the GEAN project about the SOTs. It will be tools only for the GEAN community or can be used by other communities?
Most of the tools are actually open source tools projects that we contribute. So in general, everything or almost everything developed within GEANT has been published to GitHub or some other repository that can be used by the wider community. I believe that most of the SOX tools will have the similar approach, that they will be available for the communities. Of course, we will be taking care about supporting and helping installation or documentation for our constituents, but the tools themselves are almost always available open source.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think that we can close this session. We already filled the time slot. I would like to thank to all the participants, all the speakers today, and give them a round of applause for all of them. Yes, thank you. Now it's time for the coffee break. Just one announcement regarding tonight's dinner. The gathering place, we would like to invite you all to join us tonight for the dinner. The gathering place is in front of Hotel Bellevue, the hotel that is next to this one, at 19:30. So now we have the coffee break for around 30 minutes, and we will start with the last session for today at 15:40.